Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange, and thank you so much for joining us again. Lots to talk about today. It looks like the fight between Governor Walker and the public employee unions may be about to move to the front burner again. We'll talk about what happens next. And we will talk about the latest proposal to come out of the state capitol having to do with concealed carry. That is, let folks carry a concealed gun without any permit, without any training whatsoever. And we'll talk about whether the Milwaukee Brewers have turned the corner and whether it's still too early in the season to really get all that excited. All right, first let's introduce everybody. Newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Gerard Randall, consultant and local job creation expert. And Denise Callaway, the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we'll talk about is the ruling by a Madison judge this week that throws out the Scott Walker Republican legislature budget repair law. That's the law that would severely cut back public employee collective bargaining, and it caused all those demonstrations at the Capitol this winter. She didn't blast the law, but found that the manner in which it was approved violated state open meetings law. So the big question now is what happens? Will we wait for a Supreme Court decision, or will we go through this whole process again, demonstrations and all, and will it be a long summer, Denise?
Well, I think it could be a long summer. You know, one thing that happened on Friday afternoon was that the State Department of Justice asked that the order be vacated. The judge's ruling be vacated. So we'll see what happens to that and ask the Supreme Court to take that action. I think that given the politics that we're in this state right now, it's going to become law. It's a question of whether or not the Republicans want to wait until June 6th to see what the Supreme Court, which certainly seems to be stacked in their favor, decides to do, or if they decide to run it through the legislative process again, either as part of the budget or as a separate issue. But it's going to become law. It's just a question of when and where. But I think, you know, the one thing that the judge didn't do was to talk about the law, because that wasn't the issue that was before her. The issue that was before her was whether or not the Senate or the conference committee actually violated the open meetings law, which she found that it did. And therefore, whatever action they took was null and void. But I think it has the potential to be a very long summer. If this issue has a chance to come before us again, I think you're going to find more people in Madison again very unhappy about this issue. You know, the thing that we've tend to have forgotten in this whole process is that the basic issue, the idea that collective bargaining rights needed to be taken away because employees would not give on pension benefits and on health care benefits is null and void. Right. Because state employees were saying they were willing to do exactly what the legislation proposed. So the question now is, what is this really all about? If you have this concession, you're able to hopefully step back a little bit and say, you have in essence what you want. Why is this bill necessary? I think that's the question that needs to be asked, and I think the Republicans are going to move forward with it, and I think it's going to be a long, hot summer in Madison.
If you were advising the Republican legislators, would you say, just hold off, let's see what the Supreme Court does, or introduce this, put it in committee, and let's get it through again?
Well, there's certainly a lot of clamor for the legislative leadership to take this up next week, get it passed, get it done. That's only a week before, literally 1 week before the Supreme Court would entertain the motion to throw it out. I guess I would opt for waiting. They waited this long to find out what the courts are going to do. I don't think anyone, certainly on the Republican side of the House, thought that Judge Sumi was going to side in their favor. And my personal belief is that it was a stretch to come up with the reasoning that she did. That being said, I think either way, as Denise pointed out, it's going to become law. Now, there will be a lot of casualties in the process. This will be bumping up against the July 12th date for recall elections. And how much of an impact will whatever the legislature decides to do, how much of an impact will that have on those recalls? Because you're asking the membership to come back and vote again, some for the fourth time, most for the third time at least, on this legislative package. You're asking them to come back and vote, and that vote certainly will be additional fodder in these recall elections. And if nothing else, it drags the debate out and it puts it front and center, because there was a lot of drama. Who knows what the reaction is going to be from Democrats that find the law obnoxious, and do they have other tactics up their sleeve too in order to either delay or prevent the law from being put into effect?
Joel, I know you're not a Republican, but
really?
if you are a Republican state legislator, you've got to be thinking, okay, if we introduce this again, it's not going to pass in a week, because there's probably a good chance that those Democratic senators will just split again.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I don't think you can leave the state every time a vote comes up, that you don't want to take. But clearly, the Republicans don't want to bring it up again. They could have brought it up weeks ago. They didn't have to wait until the Judge Sumi decision. It was clear that the way they passed it, they had the doors to the Capitol locked and wouldn't let anybody inside, and you had this vote with no Democrats present, they could have passed it legally. Clearly, they have a majority in both houses of the legislature. We know that. They didn't have to have an illegal meeting to pass it. But clearly there was all kinds of things wrong with that meeting. But they didn't want to take another vote on it. And the reason they didn't want to take another vote on it is extremely unpopular all over this state. It's bringing tons of money into this state to organize these recall elections. And there are 6 recalls against Republicans this summer. But starting in January, all the Republicans that got elected in 2010 can also be recalled. And if they want to go on record over and over to destroy collective bargaining in this state, the state that created collective bargaining for public employees, a 50-year tradition, 60 years, they don't have the guts to vote on it again, or they would have done it. They would have done it already. Now, when the Supreme Court meets in a couple weeks, is that court so corrupt that they are just going to automatically throw it out without listening to arguments, without taking briefs, without any deliberation? I mean, we know that it is a corrupt court, but I don't even believe they're that corrupt. I don't think they have the guts to knock it out with a few hours of hearing. They have to certainly, deliberate and take legal arguments. So it is going to go on all summer. And as Denise pointed out, this decision was only related to that clearly illegal meeting that they held to pass this law. It hasn't, the substance of the law, whether it is legal or not, whether, it is, taking away everyone's rights that have existed for half a century, they can do like that just because they happen to have a majority in the legislature. That will be another legal challenge, and this is going to go on all year.
All right, next topic. Republicans have been pushing for a concealed carry law for years, but even a lot of conservatives were taken aback a little bit this week when a legislative committee approved a version which would let people carry concealed guns without having to get any permit, no training, nothing. It's hard to believe that this would be the final product, Joel.
Truthfully, I got to say there are some forms of political ideology that are indistinguishable from mental illness. They really are. We know there's a political argument about concealed carry. This isn't a political argument. This is an argument over a law which would be the worst in the country, a law that would allow people to come into the Capitol with deadly weapons. And John Erpenbach said, on the floor of the Senate, why do we have those metal detectors? We know that the legislators have been terrified about the public. That's why they passed the collective bargaining law at a closed meeting that they didn't even let the public attend. And now they want angry members of the public to be wandering around the Capitol and other public buildings and Summerfest and daycare centers and with concealed deadly weapons. I mean, this is a nonsensical piece of legislation. Every intelligent Republican should vote against it and should, if they want concealed carry, let them pass a concealed carry law. I'm against concealed carry, period. But if they want it, at least have people get permits, at least do background checks, at least make sure that, the most dangerous people in our midst aren't walking around with firearms.
Denise, I was talking to a friend of mine who's kind of a gun nut the other day, and he said, Dan, the Constitution says you have the right to bear arms. It doesn't say you have the right to bear arms only after you get a permit and have training and classes. You have the right to bear arms. And that's why this is called constitutional carry, because they argue that's what the Constitution says.
Right, and there are all kinds of interpretations about whether or not that right to bear arms dealt with at that point in time in our country's history, the need for people to do that because they were part of militias to help defend this country, to defend their neighbors. We have a well-trained, well-qualified police force that's designed to do that now.
The police don't want their lives at risk.
They don't want their lives at risk. They're even, Chief Flynn, who supports the idea of concealed carry, says that this legislation, the way that it's in place now, is nuts. It doesn't make any sense. We might as well start renaming streets in this city, Tombstone, El Paso, Wichita, because it's going to be like the Wild West. When you have that opportunity for people to have these weapons, deadly weapons, we're talking about handguns. There's only one purpose for a handgun. And I don't see many guys out deer hunting with a handgun. Handguns are used when we're talking about people trying to defend themselves from other human beings. So if we take a look at what's going to happen with people having the ability to carry these handguns, no kinds of checks at all when it relates back to someone's mental state, when it relates back to whether or not this is someone who, has the ability to cause bodily harm to other individuals, no kind of training. I mean, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense at all.
You know some of the power brokers better than I do. Mm-hmm. Is this part of a game plan? I'm watching some of this stuff the last week. So introduce something that is almost radical and then compromise in the end. And so you can say, well, we weren't that radical. Propose that Madison be spun off and now that idea is dead. Propose that all this money is cut from MPS and they get another $100 million today. Is this?
Well, I wish $100 million had come to MPS, but we got $8 million out of the $100 million.
That did not happen.
Or $100 million to
schools,
public education.
Right.
So is this another one of those, okay, let's propose this far out thing, and then in the end, we'll get concealed carry, but it won't be that dramatic, and we can say we compromised?
Well, there's a bit of that. I mean, in any legislative body, you've got extremes when it comes to perspectives. You've got those who would say absolutely no guns in anyone's possession, and you've got those who say, well, they ought to be able to have guns and carry them openly without any restrictions. Somewhere in the middle is going to be a compromise, and I believe this will be one of those examples.
And this only passed by one vote, a committee by one vote.
Right. And the governor has the opportunity to exercise some discretionary vetoes with the legislation should it make it to his desk in the current form. The thing that I look at that makes for the opportunity for compromise. You've had an organization that's been running ads that have advocated for no restrictions on those who carry publicly firearms. And there had to be a response to that because typically in the Republican Party at least, you've got the firearm lobby that has been a strong supporter. On the other hand, you have even Republicans Joel, that find it very reasonable that there be gun safety classes for those who opt to carry their firearms in public and that there be permits. And while that lobby is frankly very quiet, it's also very effective. And I think that's where you're going to see some movement towards the middle with the final piece of legislation that comes forward.
I don't know where you get this idea anyone's moving towards the middle. The Republican Party has moved far and farther to the right. Tom Barrett, the mayor of Milwaukee, brought up the other day, this bill has never even considered whether if you have a deadly weapon in your possession, you can be falling down drunk or not. Why wouldn't you want people carrying a weapon that can kill a human being to be sober? Shouldn't that at least
But Tom Barrett doesn't want anyone to possess firearms.
I'm talking about any intelligent restriction.
No,
and the Republicans have not accepted a single intelligent restriction. They in fact are going much farther the other way. They are coming up with the worst versions of these laws on the face of the planet. There are only 4 states in the United States who have even proposed anything as extreme as Wisconsin.
Is this an example that in Madison they really don't understand that Milwaukee is a completely different world than the rest of the city?
I think they really don't care.
I mean, maybe
I think they don't care.
Maybe constitutional carry might be a good idea in Spooner, but
I don't think it's a good idea in Spooner. I don't think it's a good idea in Spooner. I think what we have to realize is, we live in a society where now, when people have disagreements, it's one-upsmanship. It's people not always using their best behavior, their brains sometimes when they make decisions about how they're going to handle and respond to situations. And we have a political climate that is becoming more and more volatile, more and more sour, where, people drop the atomic bomb on someone in terms of language that they use or accusations that they make when someone disagrees with what they do. And it influences people's behavior. I think in this political climate, where people feel like they can do and kind of say anything, particularly if they're responding to something on the internet anonymously, to be able to have concealed carry, it's just like going ahead and throwing a match on gasoline. We do not have, somehow seem to have lost our ability to respond and agree and disagree, except of course here, in common courteous ways. Well, and I'm very concerned about this.
A tragedy like Gabrielle Giffords that we all witnessed and ripped our hearts out seeing what happened, and something like that doesn't seem to faze these people.
Well, more closer to home was the incident at the pizza restaurant earlier in the week over someone drinking someone else's beer, a gun being used, and someone losing their life as a result. But that has been recognized in the party as a reason for having a more reasonable approach to concealed carry. And that's why I say there's going to be compromise.
All right, we'll shift directions. The Milwaukee Brewers are hot again. They have one of the best at-home records in baseball. They're only about 3 games behind first place St. Louis. With only about 50 games of a 180-game season completed, you wonder, Joel, you go to a lot of games, is it way too early to get excited? Is it just a little too early to get excited?
Yeah, well,
they look fantastic.
They do look fantastic. And it is too early for scoreboard watching. I mean, you can't say, well, did St. Louis lose today? And, are we going to move up, another game? But, it's not too early at all to say that this is a heck of a team. You've got 5 starting pitchers. The worst of them are fantastic. Chris Darvison has won the fewest games, and he's pitched as good as any of the other 4. And Randy Wolf pitched a great game the other day. And you've got just fantastic starting pitching. You had a whole month of April in which Ryan Braun and Prince Fielder were tearing it up, and now going into May, it's been Corey Hart and Jonathan Lucroy, a guy who came out of nowhere, the catcher. Who've been big offensive threats. You've got Niger Morgan, who was a surprise, and is. I wish he could stay healthy for a couple games and do some of the great stuff that he's been doing. But it's a fun team to watch. Yeah, one of the best pitchers in the game. Zach Greinke hit a home run when I was there the other day. Besides pitching a great game, I mean, what more can you want?
Denise, I know football is your big thing.
It is.
But when you look at the Brewers, it's a baseball crazy town. And you see everybody's like, oh, this might be the year. This might be the year.
Well, God bless Joel, who lives and breathes the Brewers and knows everything about them and all the different players and their stats and everything. I use a different barometer to tell whether or not this is a team that's hot that people have a lot of hope in, and that's all the big Bernie Brewer gnome controversy. When you can get that many people to get out and figure out how they can take as many of those gnomes as they can, that's a sign that the Brewers are hot.
Were you out of the park at 5 in the morning?
No, I was not. I've got too much other stuff in my trunk.
I mean, Nazir looks like a superstar right now, doesn't he?
I'm telling you, the guys are young. Many of them have a good deal of experience under their belt now. They didn't get lost with the high salaries. I mean, their heads didn't overwhelm them. And so I'm thinking that this team has probably got the stability, the leadership to go into the second half of the season, not just with a lot of confidence, but frankly, with a lot of potential to end up into the playoffs and go some distance. One of the things that actually gives me a little bit of confidence in being able to say that, if you looked at the series against Washington, now granted, Washington is a team that's down towards the bottom and they're not expected to do too well. You had them come from behind.
Hit a grand slam.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, 2 grand slams in that game.
We'll take him.
But I really think that we've got players that don't give up. And even when it looks kind of dour in the late innings of the game, they're still out there giving it a good try. This weekend, we've got San Francisco on deck. And if they can take 2 out of those 3 games against San Francisco, then I'm truly a real believer in it.
Is this the year where they have to stay incredibly healthy, or is there some playroom there?
Well, you always want to stay healthy, and hardly any team does the entire year. Denise was talking about signs. I'll tell you one of the signs that I've noticed, and it wasn't just this year, last year too. You go out in public all summer long, I swear, every time I go out in public, downtown, any public place, I see somebody wearing Brewers clothes. Mm-hmm. It used to see that all. You see Packers stuff all the time, but you didn't see the Brewers stuff all the time. Now, every time you go out, you see the Brewers stuff. They're marketing very well. People love individual players, and know about them and are really into them. They got a smart owner who's done the right moves. They got a very smart general manager. These sports talk radio shows, every time they lose a few games, they're ready to fire Doug Melvin. But he has turned so much into gold. He finds players who are disappointments where they were, and they come here and they really take off, like Niger Morgan I'm expecting to do here. It's a lot of fun. And
is this Fielder's last year?
Probably.
Yeah.
He's going to get a fantastic contract somewhere, and we gave so much money to Corey Hart and Ryan Braun. I don't know if we can give him as much as he's going to get. But,
I think
even I know, though, that Corey Hart looks like he's been worth the money.
Yeah.
Particularly,
he's streaky. He's streaky, but when he gets on a real streak,
well, they're all
fantastic.
Streaky. I mean, even Ricky Weeks is streaky. But they managed to come up with a combination that either of hitting power or pitching that gets them through games that look as though they're going to be all but lost when you get into the 7th inning.
Does it look like this manager was a good choice?
Yeah. He's very comfortable with the team, and they're very comfortable with him. And it was clear that last year that wasn't the case. Right. And so I think they feel good playing for this guy, and he is clearly a fan of theirs and a strong supporter of theirs, and they're on the same page totally.
I hope they do well, because for those of us who are football fans, and it doesn't look like there might be a season, or at least it might start a lot later, to be able to have something great to watch would be a treat.
All right. Well, now for something even more surprising than a Brewers winning streak. A congressional seat at the Empire State, held by Republicans for decades, was captured this week by the Democrats. And a committee chairman from the Badger State may have had a lot to do with it. Let's call it poetic justice. Here's Rick Horowitz.
Hey, boys and girls. It's Uncle Rick. Welcome back to Rhyme Time. We've got a great little poem for you today. It's all about a man, a congressman, who went in the blink of an eye from a shining light to a toxic sight. And it's all about the folks who helped him do it. You ready? Great. Our poem is called Generational Confrontational, and it goes like this. Happy Democrats, scrappy Democrats, triumph in upstate New York. Plucky Democrats, Lucky Democrats laughing and popping the cork. Win with Medicare, spin with Medicare, fear into ballot box gold. Plea for Medicare, key for Medicare, everyone's gonna get old. Sad Republicans, mad Republicans, thought they could split us in half. Bold Republicans told Republicans this is the way. What a laugh. New requirements. True, requirements slide if you've turned 55. Or requirements, more requirements, lurk there to eat you alive. Great for selfishness, bait for selfishness, toss all the kids overboard. Only selfishness, lonely selfishness, lets the young oxen be gored. Skeptic citizens, dyspeptic citizens went to the polls in a huff. Raging citizens, aging citizens said to Paul Ryan, enough. Brand new confidence, grand new confidence. Look at that spring in their step. Spry with confidence, high with confidence. Here's a fresh Democrat rep. Happy Democrats, scrappy Democrats, victory, raise high the cup. Plucky Democrats, lucky Democrats. How can they screw this one up?
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful holiday weekend.